The computational power that runs Bitcoin, running at about 160 quintillion calculations per second, is beyond the reach of any government or any group of governments. So it's achieved escape velocity. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, if governments really wanted to, they may have been able to thwart Bitcoin. But now it's too late. It's simply escape velocity has been achieved, and there's nothing any government can do. Number one. Number two, you've got people inside government that are now pro Bitcoin. So you've got a senator from Wyoming, for example, who is absolutely pro Bitcoin, who's lobbying for Bitcoin, wants to change the state of Wyoming to be a Bitcoin state. They've got a Bitcoin bank, and they want to compete with Delaware. They want to compete with other states. So you've got on the senatorial level, Bitcoin is making inroads. You've got people in Congress, in the Senate, who own Bitcoin, who are not going to fight Bitcoin because they would benefit by owning Bitcoin. They love Bitcoin. It's a fifth column working inside the government. So they're not motivated to stop Bitcoin. Number four, what is more likely is that in the next couple of years, the government, the US government, the IRS will come to Bitcoiners and say, hey, Bitcoiners, we'll give you a 90% discount on your taxes if you pay us in Bitcoin. Because the government's going to be woefully underrepresented in Bitcoin, as other countries around the world are racing ahead. And it's not even entered the hash war or hash race or Bitcoin race with these other countries. Remember, in the 1960s, America entered the space race to compete with the Soviet Union to get into outer space. And there was that Sputnik moment. But America hasn't had their Bitcoin moment yet. We're still letting these other countries around the world grab the brass ring, to grab the momentum, and to now moving ahead of the US. There's a possibility, for example, Iran could be the richest country in the world because it's aggressively mining Bitcoin and accumulating Bitcoin right now. Does the US want that to be the outcome? Well, if they don't start moving now and start accumulating Bitcoin, then that's the outcome. So hello, third world status, goodbye American century, goodbye US dollar. So the more likely outcome is that the government is not regulating Bitcoin so much as they need to accumulate. They're going to set an industrial policy where it's going to be, we're going to subsidize energy and we're going to mine and accumulate Bitcoin because we want to be number one. If they don't want to be number one, America, then step aside and let some other country be number one because you're too fat and lazy. Get the fuck out of the way. Corrections in Bitcoin have been successfully getting less and less and less. I mean, I've went through 80 to 90% corrections, in Bitcoin since 2011. So, but since then we've had less and less and less. So we just experienced a 20% correction. And so now that correction's over and now we start going higher. And so it'll start to behave more like an asset class where you might see 10 to 20% corrections. The 30, 40, 50% corrections, I think we're past that because the size of the market's gotten to be a lot bigger and the amount of money on the sidelines waiting to get in is enormous. The biggest money funds in the world, BlackRock, Stan Druckenmiller, Paul Tudor Jones, Mass Mutual Insurance Company, they're all sitting on the bid, hoping to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. And that's only going to get bigger and bigger. Sovereign wealth funds are going to get into this, et cetera. So it's not right or left. It's on its own vector. It's on its own path. And it, as I said, it disintermediates the nation state. So you don't need politicians. You don't need politicians. You don't need right or left. You just have the hardest money asset in the world, and you're free to trade with anybody. And this is the thing. Fiat money promotes war. Paul Krugman over at the New York Times said that the U.S. dollar is backed with men with guns. He admitted in the New York Times that the U.S. dollar fosters violence. It's backed by violence. It's terrorism in a little slip of paper. The U.S. dollar is a terrorist note. This essentially is backed by financial terrorism, whereas Bitcoin is peace. So if I want to get some Bitcoin from you, I have to offer you something that you're willing to take and trade for Bitcoin. So there's no coercion because it's unconfiscatable. I cannot confiscate or coerce the Bitcoin out of you. So I can only get it through peaceful trade. So that hopefully appeals to the angels of our better nature, us as humans, and we move away from this violence and the paper money and the fiat money and the U.S. foreign policy and the politicians that love violence. They live on violence. We don't want that anymore. We want peace. We want Bitcoin.
Okay.
You, Danielle, I'm going to call you immediately. We're going to take the twins.
Rule the world.
We're going to get us twins into a spaceship. We're going to fly to Mars. We're going to meet Elon Musk. We're gonna make space omelets on Mars with Elon Musk with the twins.
Sounds
That's my
good.
first
Sounds
call.
good. All right. I'm going to combine these two because they came up a lot from Prism Studios and David Sutherland. Both want to know. Ask Max if he's ever going to sell his Bitcoin. So, what would it take for Max Keiser to sell his Bitcoin? And this is a personal question, but came up a lot. How the people want to know how much Bitcoin you own.
Well, I'm probably not going to sell my Bitcoin. I'm going to pass it on to the next generation. I think I have a responsibility to do that. And number two, I wouldn't want to sell Bitcoin back into fiat and give power peace, turn peace back into war. So, and I'm not motivated in any way to sell any Bitcoin. The more I hold, the hodler, the I keep going hodling Bitcoin. The faster the revolution happens away from war, and we enter a peace, an era of peace. You know, the thing about that holds humans back is something that's a vestige from our days, hundreds of thousands of years ago. You know, hard coded in our mind is this instinct towards coin I have back into fiat money circulation to feed, and then somebody in Washington will turn that into a bomb, and they'll go kill somebody in a foreign country because they're sadists. I don't want that. You know, we got a bunch of sadists running this country, and that's not, and they run by fiat money. Every time they kill 100,000 people, they go print more money. It's disgusting.
And how much you own. I understand why you wouldn't want to disclose that, but is there a range you could share?
Well, I mean, I started buying it at $1, you know, and that was 10 years ago. So, um, you know, there's a lot of zeros. Well, one book I love is Critical Path by Buckminster Fuller. And he is really an antecedent to Bitcoin in that he speculated on there being a money made of energy, purely of energy, by energy. And he also, very early in his life, decided to not do anything unless it benefited the world in total, as a whole. So he came up with the geodesic dome and these types of things that were they were great for humanity. He got out of this idea of thinking at that he was only into self-aggrandizement. He's just thinking globally all the time. And that book, Critical Path, which is his book, it's a great book to read.
So how old were you when you read that? Like you were like 12?
I read that in the womb. So my ass came out first. And basically that's how I entered life. Like, kiss my ass, world. I'm trying to finish my book, right? And it was like, I'm doing
All
something
right.
here.
All right, let's get to the moment the people have waited patiently for, including myself. I do not know your forecast yet. I'm going to learn it for the first time right now.
Which I think is a good 2021 objective. You know, we were going to catch up to gold. That would bring us up to not quite half gold's valuation, but getting close to gold's valuation. I think the catalyst is going to be, as I said, a major central bank failing. Plus, the money printing is going to go absolutely Weimar Republic. So we're going to see that, depending on how you calculate this, the 10 to 15 trillion that was printed in the
So
last